Okay, so good morning for some of you and good afternoon for those who are here with us in Israel. I would like to present the guys who joined me today for mastering migration process. Um, we are here with the two co-founders of iRiver, Michael Hakimi and Edward Tsinovoi. Uh, I can tell you that both of those guys has a long reputation with the CDN migration. Here in the company, we guide and help a lot of companies that assist us for making their migration process. And we gather a lot of information about it. This is what incentivizes us also to write a full playbook that try to cover everything from end to end, which all the guys who join our webinar today will be uh, getting access to this playbook right after. Um, Migration. I we decided to make this webinar for the second time since migration it's one of the pains or barriers for many companies. We find a lot of companies in the industry which under a huge vendor lock, and they understand that migration is just a huge overhead that probably will defocus their companies or organization, and many DevOps team cannot afford this for themselves. And we got a lot of questions around the topic, and we also write a lot about it in our blogs. So we decided to have one full hour dedicated for this topic. And so we're going to start. I hope you enjoy. If in any situation you have something to question about, please use the Q&A button in your black panel below. You will keep anonymous. No one see your question. Only us. And that's all. So again, thank you for joining us. The first question, I will give it to you, Edward. Was about how motivate organization, what is the motivation of organization to migrate in the way that you see it, of course.
Thanks, Roy, and thank you for having me with you today. From my perspective, the organizations don't want to migrate. They prefer to stay with the vendor that they're serving them, and should happen something, should be some event or some pain that will cause really to migrate. Because today the edge, the CDNs, is in many cases a core or a key component in the solution of companies and the online services. But finally, the motivation, the compelling event will be around following areas. The first one will be around availability. Today, especially premium vendors are very stable and reliable, but still, if there are instabilities, and when these instabilities impact the customers, they might look for a better and more stable vendor, and this could be the first reason for migrate from one vendor to another vendor. The second reason might be a cost. In our nowadays, the edge cost is significant, and there is a demand to try and be more and more cost effective and efficient. And as a result of that, if you cannot you don't succeed to negotiate the price well with your current vendor, you might not have a choice, and you will need to migrate to another vendor in order to succeed to reduce the cost. And the third aspect is the performance. Today, in our world, we are serving a global, many companies serving a global customers, global end users, and sometimes the coverage of the initial chosen CDN is not fit to the needs of the audience of this specific online service. And as a result of that, there is a need to consider migrate to another platform, which will provide a better coverage from network perspective, which will be result with better performance for end users.
So let me see if I understand correctly. There's basically three reasons you mentioned here. The first one is functionality. So I need more. For example, so far, I didn't use Edge Compute, but today I see a lot of value in it, but my current CDN doesn't use it, so I need to find another Edge platforms that provide this to me. The second option is performance. So I need to find a vendor that provide me a better performance in my major geolocations. And the third one it's cost. It's to find a better way or a better option to reduce my cost, right?
Yeah, thanks for adding the functionality. I totally
Hmm.
agree that it's one of the additional aspects that will push you. You might use a vendor which didn't add the functionality that you are looking for, and other vendor already added, and you really want this functionality, and the only way for you to get it is actually to do the migration.
I understand. Okay. Um, there is the way that you see that the migration process is changing according to the main goal. For example, if I want to reduce cost, my migration will be totally different, or it will be more over the same thing.
So I think again, the motivation will be different. The general process will look plus or minus the same. It will start with mapping the candidates. What are the candidates? What are the other alternatives that can answer on your new need compared to your existing platform? Which of these candidates answering on your existing needs that you are using today in your platform? And today, the edge, the CDNs became much richer from capabilities perspective compared to what they were years ago. So if years ago the CDNs were dummy pipes, today much more happens on the edge, and you should be aware to that, because you will need to verify that at least on the paper, the candidates that you are trying to choose are supporting these capabilities, and then enter to the process, which is it's not trivial process.
Okay. Mickey, can you walk me through the migration process, how from a high level perspective, how it looks like?
So the migration process, it really depends on the company and you know, the amount of capabilities, the services that you're using at the edge. But the migration process, you know, it might be different between one company and another. But in a very high level, I would divide it, the migration process into three main steps. The first step is, you know, is the research part. You want to do some preliminary research in order to understand um, to which CDN you would like to migrate to, and as part of this research, you need to become familiar with other CDNs. You need to pick the CDNs, the CDN that you want to migrate to, based on, you know, based on, as it was mentioned, the motivation. If for example, if I want to reduce price, I will probably select a cheaper provider. The second step is the migration itself. So you would need to, you know, you would need to configure the second CDN, and to build to migrate all your configuration, your existing configuration, from first CDN to the second CDN. And the third part is the actual transition of the traffic. In this step, you would move the traffic from the original CDN to the new CDN, and it would be highly recommended to do this transition in a gradual way. So this is just
So three steps. The first step is find your CDN. define your KPI. What is the reason? What is your motivation to do it in general? I guess that you also need to map your functionality to minimize the amount of CDN vendors that you want to really dive into and observe what they actually have to offer. Then the migration itself, which is replicated configuration, build the infrastructure for the testing. The third part, which sometimes it's look like almost like tiny, but it's moving the traffic, which is a huge event. It's not something that's just going on the way.
Right, it's a huge event and it's also a very risky event. You would like to take all the preliminary steps in order to make the third step as safe as possible for the entire organization.
Okay. Um. So let's yeah.
I think that this process, beside the steps that you mentioned, it should be heavily followed with testing, because you have a testing practically after for your configuration. You should have a testing in production. You should have heavy monitoring, which will follow the process to mitigate the risk that you mentioned. Because I agree with you, the risk in migration to cause to significant outage for the service is significant. And there are many different aspects that should be involved in the testing process during these steps to mitigate this significant risk.
And any
Right, and
example for yeah.
I would just want to add, and in many cases when I'm doing migrations for customers, I'm running in cases where there are some legacy services that there is no specific owner for them, and some configurations which you don't know what was the intention behind them and whether they are needed or not. The ability to test some of these services is very limited. So this adds an additional level of complexity, additional level of risk for these migrations.
So you basically describe a scenario when something doesn't work and you don't even aware that it doesn't work.
Yeah, this is even a different case. This is also emphasizes the need for a very good monitoring, because you need to be able to identify the issues as soon as possible. If there is an issue as part of the migration, you want to be able to identify it as quick as possible, do a revert if needed, but most importantly to identify it as quick as possible. I had a customer that did some migration with another company, and he had a significant degradation of his service for 2 weeks, and they weren't even aware of it. Their end users were significantly impacted, and no one even noticed it.
Okay. I would like you to elaborate because we illustrate a three steps. I would like to dive into the first one, which is finding the CDN. So walk me through this process. What the first steps actually contains? What are the actions that I should take in the first steps of the migration flow?
So you basically want to pick the best the next CDN that you want to migrate to, and in order to make a smart decision, you need to invest in some research. You need to understand, to map your requirements from this CDN. It could be financial requirements, it could be performance requirements, it could be functional requirements, but you need to map these requirements. For example, if you have many users in the Far East, then you need to make sure that the CDN that you pick is performing very well in the Far East, so that your end users will enjoy very good performance, and there will be no degradation in performance. If you are using more complex, more advanced capabilities from the CDN, like for example, a customer who is migrating from Akamai. Akamai, they have a very rich set of capabilities which other CDN might not be supporting. So you need to make sure that you will be able to migrate the capabilities that you are currently using to the new CDN. And if you don't, if there is some missing functionality, you need to understand what will be how you are going to mitigate, how you are going to overcome this feature gap. Also, when it comes, to usage of APIs, whether it is which APIs you are currently using. Are you using API, for example, for purging? Are you using API for monitoring? Are you using Terraform? All these capabilities that you're currently using with your existing CDN, you need to make sure that you have this support on the new CDN, and basically, prepare a plan for the migration itself. What will be the work, the investment from your side in order to do this migration project.
Mm-hmm. So it's not one-to-one. It's not that I will find the exact same alternative. And you need to find a CDN, you also need to map it. Like to map all what you're going to do, like to have a plan for the next CDN.
Yeah.
Okay. Eddie, do you have anything? Yeah.
One of the things from my experience is that even if you are taking, a default configuration and define a default configuration on another CDN, you might get a totally different behavior. So you should not only compare the functionality that these vendors provide, you should also compare the defaults. How the default behavior looks on each one of the providers, because it significantly might impact on the functionality. And same thing with when you are dive to each one of the capabilities, the name might be similar, but behind the scenes, they might do different things which will impact on your application. So you should really understand well what exactly happens behind the scenes to ensure that from your application, you will not need to take actions to adjust to these differences between the CDNs.
So your tip is like be suspicious.
You definitely should be.
Also, maybe, if you are going into a very significant project and before committing to this project, before signing the contract with commitment within the new CDN, you might want to do like a real POC on production traffic. Take one service, take one application that you feel comfortable with, and you can do a POC on the new CDN, migrate the traffic for this specific service, for this specific piece of traffic, and see how this new CDN is performing. Do the comparisons, the performance comparisons, the offload metrics. Make sure that from functional perspective, it's working as you expect. I think it's very important to do this type of POC before you committing to the entire project.
So before we move to step number 2, what is the final action of the first one? Is to choose the CDN and have the plan?
Yeah, basically you want to nail the CDN that you want to migrate to, and to have a clear plan of how the migration process is going to look like. Amount of work which is required as part of this project. For some customers with heavy usage of the edge, this project, it might take 6 months or even more. So it's not a simple project, and it might involve different teams in the organizations. So it's important to have this plan with all the required amount of work. I had a customer that had more than he had hundreds of properties in Akamai that he needs to import, and it involves many teams and organizations. It can become a real complicated project.
I got it. Okay, so we're moving forward to stage number 2. I picked the CDN that I want to move into a POC, and what's now? Well, like what is the set of action I need to take in step 2? Eddie, I would like you to take this question.
So here you are starting to configure your second CDN. After you understand in your first phase what are the functionalities that you use, now you should try to duplicate it on another CDN. I always recommend to use a staging testing environment. Don't do it on production immediately if it's possible. Try to do it on some testing environment. Start to configure the properties, the distributions, the websites, the whatever the name of these entities of the CDN itself. You should migrate all the configuration. You should during this process you should verify that from functional perspective, when you're sending HTTP requests to one vendor to the original vendor, you're getting same reply also from your new chosen vendor. The second thing that I think that you must do is start prepare dashboards. You must have a visibility, and the visibility starting from building a collection of dashboards regarding which will provide you information regarding how the CDN behaves from errors perspective, offloading perspective. You should have a visibility from performance perspective. You should have a monitoring on the performance, and not in single geolocation. You should have a global monitoring of performance in the places that your audiences are located. You should so the second aspect is the dashboards. The third aspect from my perspective will be probably the APIs. You're probably, in many cases, your CDNs are part of your operation. In many cases, in the CI/CD, you will have a purges that will clean the cache, and then you will need to integrate yourself inside these processes. So if you are migrate from CDN A to B, currently you have API call to CDN A, you will need to add to this place also a purge to CDN B. And after the process is completed, you should clean it up so you will not stuck with multiple calls to different providers. Same thing with other APIs that you might use, including Terraform and other management capabilities that currently your CDN was integrated with.
So if you can illustrate like how this step finals, what you should have.
You should have a duplicated environment that provide from functional perspective exactly the same functionality like your original environment. Then you should have a monitoring, which should allow you to compare and track the behavior of the new CDN. And at this point, you should be ready to do, first of all, the POC or the testing to verify that everything is fine, and look forward to the moving of production traffic gradually between the vendors.
So it's an important thing just to add, from my perspective, as much as I understood, you should have two environments, the new one and the old one, and both of them should be existent.
And also, Eddie touched it, but I want to emphasize it again, that the fact that during the transition, you should be able to operate with the two CDNs simultaneously. So you want to do the transition gradual, not just one CDN A and move everything to CDN B. You want do this transition gradual, and you also want the ability to roll back to the original CDN in case something unexpected happened. So you need to prepare your environment to operate against the two CDNs for this transition period. And as Eddie mentioned, it's including the APIs. It might including other stuff. For example, if you're using a purge by tag, so and you have response headers with cache tag headers, then each CDN has their own headers. So the backend needs to support both headers during the transition, needs to send both headers, so the content will be cached on the two CDNs during the transition time. And you need to understand what is required on your side in order to support both of the CDNs during the transition.
Vicky,
Hang on.
from my, it's definitely a challenge, and the per challenge, I understand in case that that both vendors support the base, the capability. I understand how you solve it. It's a work. You should go to your backend to do these changes on your backend, but it's feasible. What happened with security? How the gradual rollout takes weeks. Or again, not months, but it should take a week to do it on the safe side. What you're doing with rate limiting, what you're doing with WAF in these cases?
It's a real pain. It's a real pain, and companies are struggling a lot with this type of capabilities. It's extremely hard to operate, two WAFs at the same time. You need to have, the same, even if you configure the same set of rules on both CDNs, it's the WAF engine is still different, and one traffic can pass via CDN A and being blocked via CDN B, or vice versa. So you should expect a lot of inconsistency. You will never get consistent behavior, by using two WAFs during the transition. So you need to be prepared to handle some inconsistencies during this transition.
Okay. So we move to the third and the last step of the migration process. We have two environments, almost identical. We created in the environment test, and now we're starting move traffic. Eddie, might you take me to this flow? What I should be aware of? What are the things that I should take in order to finalize the migration process properly?
From my experience, and this is the point when you measure how well you did all your preparations. So now, because at this point you're starting to impact on the business, and you are starting to take the risks. So you should sure that you have full visibility on your production. You should be able to see. The most important thing is to have the monitoring, which allow you to compare in live the behavior of your vendors from different aspects, from behavior aspects to verify that in production you can verify that they are both sending same headers. You should verify that the caching of both CDNs behaves exactly the same. If you are defining different cache keys, you will get different behavior. If you have, you should verify that error rates on different types of traffic is equivalent. It behaves equivalently. You should verify the performance aspects for different types of traffic, from different locations, and you should have it in as a cockpit in one place. If you did your work, if you did the preparation right, you are ready to go. Now, you don't move it, like Mickey said, you don't do a switch. You are not moving all the traffic to another vendor because it's too risky. Problems will happen. the production never looks like the testing environment. So you should do it gradually. You should start with 1% of the traffic, moving to another CDN. You should monitor it carefully. After that, increase a bit, a few percent. You should give it a time. You should have a back time between this process, between these stages to allow the the business, to allow you to observe enough and to get enough confidence that you are on the right direction. And then you are in a few days moving forward through additional few steps till you are reaching, and I would recommend to reach 99% and leave 1% for a while, at least, on the other CDN, to give enough time to the entire organization to fill it, to fill the new CDN, to ensure that there is no impact, and then move to 100%. And even then, when you are moving to 100%, you always want to finish it, to clean it, to forget about the previous CDN. It's not a good idea, because in many cases, from my experience, you complete the migration process, everything looks well, and then 2 months after that, there is a call and somebody saying, listen, we have a problem as a result of the migration that you did 2 months ago, and now the problem is in kind of in the CDN. How you can prove it? The best way to prove it is to be able to revive your previous CDN, to move there 1% and compare to ensure whether this problem is also happened there. Because if the problem happened also in previous CDN, then it's definitely not the migration and not the problem of the new CDN. It's probably the problem of the origin or any other component in the middle, which had some change that caused to this unexpected behavior. If you don't have ability to move to another CDN, it will be tough for you to prove that the problem is not with your new CDN.
And
Yeah,
I think what you said is a very good approach. It's a very good approach, to keep the previous CDN alive. But to keep it for 2 months, it seems to me like a challenge, because the transition working against two platforms, it's a system which is alive, and people are adding changes to their edge platform. They're making configuration changes. They deploy edge compute code to these environments. How do you maintain two environments in parallel for 2 months?
I agree. Again, it's a challenge, but I think that if we are, as a company, decided to do this change, we should I don't know, to freeze the development which related to edge for 2 months, or to be really aware and do these changes twice. And then it's think about it, it's also not easy to test it. You need to test it twice. How you verify that if 100% of the traffic is moving through a new vendor and you made some changes on the old vendor, how do you know that the changes that you made on the old vendor are right changes? And when you will do a rollback, you will not cause even more significant problems. So I totally agree with you. It's a challenge. But if I should mitigate, if I should choose the risks, I would try to keep my old environment for some period of time, in order to be able to back and compare, because I saw so many times things which are hidden. You have so much different types of traffic, so many APIs, and one of the APIs was impacted. It might be, you might not recognize it during the process, and then if you stuck with the new one and you don't really know whether it's the CDN or not CDN, to be able to compare is priceless.
there is a question from the audience, which I want to which I want to use before we're moving to our last question of this webinar. And I will discuss privately with the guy asking this question just to make sure that I understand it correctly. But in general, like the idea is there is if there is a thought about moving from a legacy CDN architecture to a multi-CDN, what will be the impact on the cost? It's not exactly relevant to migration, but when we speak about cost, so it's kind of the question also, what will be the cost? Because now there is two CDN or more that getting into the picture. Mickey, do you want to answer this? Or Edward?
Sorry, wait, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, basically the guy from the audience asking, you speaking about cost, I want to move from a CDN to a multi-CDN. Now it's not just to find a cheaper one. I have two CDN which I need to pay for. So what will be the impact on the cost?
Impact on the cost when you migrate from a single CDN to a multi-CDN architecture.
That's right.
Okay, so it really depends on the type of the traffic, the amount of the traffic, the volume of the traffic. There are multiple parameters that you need to take into account. But in general, with multi-CDN, it's easier to reduce the cost because you always have the ability to switch to another CDN. You are in a much you have much more power in the negotiation with the vendors because you can easily move from CDN A to CDN B. So usually when you switch to multi-CDN, you're able to reduce cost. And this is also one of the reasons that the many big companies are going this way in order to reduce their edge cost.
But there is one challenge here, because if you are a customer and you have a volume and you committed to single CDN, so you got a discount for this volume, and then if you need to split your volume to two CDNs, now you have two chunks with smaller volume, and as a result of that, you might get a lower discounts from the vendors. It's a real challenge, and therefore, but there are vendors today in the market, and iRiver is one of them, which allow you to overcome this challenge. So in the past, it was your problem, and it was real problem. Today, you can overcome it with solutions like iRiver. You with same level of volume, you will succeed to reduce your cost, even when significantly, even when the traffic is split among multiple different vendors.
Okay, thank you for that. Last question. What are the risks and obstacles in a typical migration process, and how can we avoid them? So let's start with the challenges. Like, what are the big challenges that we're probably going to tackle in a classic migration? Mickey?
So I think that the biggest challenge in this migration is the risk. This is the most significant challenge because for many online service providers, for vast majority of them, the edge provider is a critical component for their service, and the last thing that you want to do is to cause a negative impact for your end users, for your customers, and this is what you are trying to avoid as part of this migration. And the migration process could be very risky. Some of that because of the reasons that we've mentioned here previously. For example, when you have legacy components which you are not able to test, or for example, if there are functionalities that you have on the original CDN and you don't have it on the new CDN, so you need to find alternatives or a way to bypass this, mitigate this. feature gaps, which are adding additional risks. And you know when this type of mistakes, when they happen, when they impact the business, it puts the entire migration process in a big question mark.
One thing from my experience is actually amount of effort that you will invest in the migration itself. Because like Mickey recommended, build a plan is definitely the right thing to do. For what I saw for many of the customers is that after they build the plan, the reality was much more complicated than their initial plan, and there are much more surprises that came up during the process. And as a result of that, the entire process, the entire complexity, finally was significantly higher than what was initially estimated. So I definitely would recommend to take a buffers and for surprises, for unexpected challenges that will come over the process.
You mean just like to get like more time, like
To get more time, to get more engineering time, to get more resources from DevOps engineers, which could allocate their time for that. Don't sometimes you have a commitment. You know that you want to switch a CDN and your renewal is in a 2 months from now, and you're saying, okay, 1 month before I will start the migration process. It's not a good idea.
yeah.
Because you enter yourself into very, very tight schedule. You don't want to be in this tight schedule. Surprises will be, unexpected things will happen. Your edge is not a dummy pipe anymore. It's doing so much things. There are so much functionality there. You must have a buffers.
Okay. Before we finish, I will say to all the guys that have join us, we will do our best to send the playbook today, and maximum it will be tomorrow. It's about like 20 pages, including all the process from end to end. We will try to cover most of the topic and get into a very, very high resolution. If you have any other question, feel free to reply to event@ioriver.io, and of course that we will try to reply as fast as possible. So first of all, thank you for joining us today, and I would like to thank also to Edward and Mickey that find time to speak with us today as well. And see you in the next webinar. Bye, guys.